I'm Averie.
And I'm Mel.
This is the Veda Lounge Podcast.
All things Vedic, cosmic, and magic.
For yoga teachers, entrepreneurs, creatives, and coming back to your own center.
We explore themes on living like you practice to knowing your nature.
Join the conversation for an embodied homecoming to illuminate your radiance.
Through getting nerdy with Vedic sciences and self-discovery, cozy into your cosmic cadence. Welcome back to the Veda Lounge Podcast. I am really excited for today's episode. It's Mel here.
And Averie. Hello, hello. Welcome back, everyone.
So we are diving into, I think, a topic that many people may have seen in passing or might be slightly familiar with, but with the conversations on holistic health, I think topics like this are so relevant. So I'm excited to introduce Hannah. I met her a few years ago. She's a military spouse as well and is just such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. So I'm excited to get nerdy with you guys. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I just finished my 300 hour with you as well. So we've dug deep together.
Oh, yes. And honestly, the paths that we're going to get into today around homeopathy and German new medicine, holistic healing, Hannah actually has been a big inspiration even when I was navigating my own health stuff. So I know that there's going to be a lot of value in this episode. And Hannah, if you're open to sharing a little bit about you, what you do, and maybe even your journey of what led you into this work.
Yes, totally. So I've tried to consolidate my story down. But I used to work for a big corporation, and I worked for them for almost a decade, and then I got super sick. And so that was what started my health journey, even getting into yoga teacher training. I needed something more in my life. And so when I was in my 200-hour teacher training, which I did not do through you, Mel, but it was in San Antonio. And during that teacher training, I was actually diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or MS, for those of you that don't know the terms. And I went through a whole journey of functional medicine, in which I'm very blessed to have found that path. But from that journey, functional medicine, taking everything out of my diet, adding things back in, taking buttloads of supplements. To me, that's just what it was. I then came across, I then got pregnant with my son, and we were deciding to do things a little bit more holistic in how we raised our children, my husband and I. And I found homeopathy because I was looking for a solution to treat my son if like an illness came up. And from learning homeopathy, I learned more of like an allopathic practical approach to it. So like a more clinical approach to it. In the beginning, I was very self-taught in that regard. I started leading study groups with Joette Calabrese's work, which was more of practical, like making it very easy for moms to come in and learn homeopathy and say, okay, when someone has strep throat, these are the 3 remedies that you take. Or when someone has a cold, these are like you go with the first line protocol here and then go down. But as I started digging and even understanding like some more of like my own symptoms that would pop up, because I never, like, to me, multiple sclerosis always felt very wrong, like of a diagnosis. And so for me, I started viewing that as a diagnosis code. Like it was just a code on an insurance form that I could utilize in the healthcare system if I really wanted to get lab testing for something. And homeopathy started to peel back layers, both on the emotional level and the physical level, to show me what was going on in my body. I was then introduced, like in my homeopathy studies, I was then introduced by a friend. She mentioned something called German New Medicine, or Germanische Heilkunde is what you would say in German. And she brought it up. I'm like, wait, what's this? And she's like, oh, well, every symptom is connected to something emotional, like a shock or event that occurred in your life, and you can see it in the brain. I'm like, what? You have to be kidding me here. So I started digging into that, and that's when I truly started to understand that yes, there's always an emotional connection to the physical symptoms that we have in our body. And what's beautiful about homeopathy is that for those that you can't like make a practical shift in your life, so you have a symptom that you need to, like it's a separation need. You can't physically separate from something like the military. There is homeopathy allows us to create these perceptual shifts in our brain when we focus on the emotions. And that's what really drove me to start studying homeopathy in a deeper, more integrated way. And so now in my practice, I specifically utilize the lens of German New Medicine. So understanding why someone is getting symptoms, why someone might be diagnosed with a bucket diagnosis like multiple sclerosis or like Crohn's disease, something like that. And then homeopathy can help someone shift that on the emotional, mental plane. Of course, it can also help with physical symptoms as well. But as we all know, oftentimes those physical symptoms still come back. Just like how yoga or movement in the body can shift the fascia, shift traumas, make movements and changes, and also just physically make you feel more space and make you feel better. Homeopathy can do that in the mind, which is what's really, really, really cool. So that's how I got to where I am now. I am still a student of homeopathy. I'll be a student of homeopathy for my entire life. But I am going back to school in the UK, but I do actively see clients now in a coaching sense for both homeopathy and German New Medicine.
So I'm gonna dive right in and I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm a total muggle, right? Like I told Mel that before we hopped on, and I'm like, I'm so excited just to learn. So can you just maybe explain to somebody like myself who's listening, who's like, what is what is
Homeopathy.
this? What is homeopathy? Like what are we doing here? Is it a subsect of functional medicine where we're using diet and exercise, or is there something more to it, like the practicality of what you're actually doing here?
Yes. So, and I probably should mention too, like you mentioned the functional medicine piece. I was trained as a functional medicine health coach to start. So that is diet, that is exercise, that is mental mind space, that is stress relief. Like there's 5 pillars of functional medicine. Homeopathy is its own form of medicine. It is the second most used medicine and utilized medicine in the world. So it was the first form of like true medication or medicine outside of like herbal tinctures and herbal like prescriptions, that type of stuff. And it was the largest form of medicine until the 1940s when antibiotics were created. And then Big Pharma came in and Big Pharma took over, and it became more of an antibiotic and antidepressant, versus homeopathy is a form of medicine that works with the body. So in layman's terms, like I mentioned, it's its own form of medicine. It is not herbal remedies. It is not breath work. It is not like holistic medicine like people like to think of. It is homeopathic medicine. They are these little vials, and I know like I'm not sure if this even goes on video, but they're actual little vials of pellets that you can buy at most health food stores. A lot of grocery stores now even carry them. The difference between homeopathy and conventional or allopathic medicine is that homeopathic medicine is meant to work with the body, versus allopathic medicine works against, or it stops something from happening. The biggest piece of homeopathy is like when you look at the laws that are working in the body, is called like, or the law of like the law of similars. So when you have a cold, for example, and the symptoms of the cold are a runny nose and runny eyes, like your eyes are like teary, dripping, you use like one of the potential remedies to utilize is allium cepa, which is in its homeopathic form, it is onion in homeopathic form. And I'll get into how you make something into homeopathic form as well. But onion, when you're cutting an onion or chopping an onion, what happens to a lot of people? Eyes run, nose run. So you treat the symptoms with the remedy that would produce the symptoms. But in when it is made in homeopathic form, it actually can help support those symptoms and help heal those symptoms and flush them out of the body. The same goes for something like arsenic. So someone is poisoned, they're vomiting, they have diarrhea, let's say. One of the remedies that could be used for that is arsenicum album or arsenic in homeopathic form. So it's beautiful. Like you look at the like treats like, you're looking at remedies that are like similar producing of symptoms, but in homeopathic form, they treat the symptoms. So that's like the very basics of what it is. Those are some common remedies that you would see at the store, the two that I just mentioned. But there are thousands of remedies, and anything can be made into homeopathic form. Um, and so, and like every year there's more, there's more provings is what they're called of remedies. So essentially doing a double-blind placebo study of figuring out what a remedy does in homeopathic form. So you could take like a recent one that was done in the last couple of years was falcon. So taking the feather of a falcon, making it into a homeopathic remedy. And then the provings are done on individuals and you can see what are the symptoms that they produce in a healthy individual. And then that's what they can treat in someone that is sick or suffering, either mentally or physically from an illness.
So like if let's just say with Falcon, and I don't know, but like if Falcon creates a headache, then we know that Falcon can treat the headache, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. If it creates like a headache that's always on the right side, let's say of like the majority of the people that are within that proving, then it's great for a right-sided headache.
It's so
Supportive.
interesting. It makes me think of how nature always gives that the balance of
Mm-hmm.
What I
Yes.
find so interesting is this concept of, we oftentimes coming from the yoga world look at things through an Ayurvedic lens, which is the principle of opposites, right? So it's kind of, almost the exact opposite of that in and of itself, where you're treating like with like, when in Ayurveda, we're seeking to create balance. So I just love, right, that there's so many different ways to potentially treat and heal the body. So thank you for explaining, because at first I'm like, is this herbal tinctures? What are we doing here? So can you maybe speak a little bit more? Talk about getting things into that homeopathic state, or so what does that look like when we're creating these remedies or these medicines? And is that something that we can do, or is that something that is outsourced?
Yes, of course. So homeopathic medicines they're potentized medicines. So what the potentization process looks like, and I do make them. I make matrodonal remedies, so remedies from the mother, so remedies from placentas, vernixes, like not vernixes, vernix, um, like colostrum, breast milk, that type of stuff. But so it is possible to make your own remedies. However, I wouldn't recommend that for just like a regular home prescriber that doesn't have any idea of how to do this. The remedies are made, and it's energetic medicine, is what it is. It's energy. But do you take is you take a tincture of a medicine. So like what you think of as that herbal tincture.
Mhm.
Let's talk about let's just talk about like the onion, allium cepa. So to potentize it into a homeopathic form, you tincture, you take some alcohol, and you take the onion, you put it into the tincture, you let it sit for a few weeks. It absorbs into the alcohol. That makes the mother tincture, like the initial main tincture. And you could take that if you want to, just like as an onion, because onions are safe to take in actual like tincture form. But what you do to potentize it into like the first centesimal potency, which is what you would see in the store as like a 1C. Anything that's like a C, this is what it would look like. You would take a drop of the tincture, the mother tincture of the onion, and you would drop it into 99 drops of alcohol. And that in itself doesn't make anything homeopathic. But what makes it homeopathic and gives it that energetic form of medicine is something called succussion. So that one drop in that 99 drops of alcohol, you then succuss it 50 to 100 times. And Samuel Hahnemann, who is the founder of homeopathy, used to always do this onto like a Bible, or this is the Materia Medica, something with like a harder cover, or you can do it on your hands. But a succussion is not just a shake, it is literally like a pounding. So I'm not sure if we can hear this, but it is a pounding. So that pounding or a succussion takes place 50 to 100 times, and that gives you a 1C. You then take one drop of that, place it into 99 more drops of alcohol, succuss it again, and then that gives you a 2C. So when you get up to a 30C or a 200C, you can imagine how many times the succussion, like, or this process has taken place, how many succussions this has been, that has been done to this remedy, and how little of the actual physical material is left in the remedy. There's something called Avogadro's number, which is anything less than a 12C in homeopathy. So you've done that process that I just explained 12 times. And that is a number where you can actually still see the physical material, like a little bit of it within that bottle if you were to look through a microscope. And but what's really, really neat is recently, and I can give you this link, Mel and Averie, but recently studies have been done where you can actually see the different energetic form of potencies like up into the 200C level that they tested. Similar to water, similar to like Dr. Emoto, who did a water study. And I'm not sure if you all are familiar with this, but the water, like the study of water, speaking love to the water, speaking gratitude to the water, versus playing like death metal or speaking like you dirty water or like speaking bad things to the water. It changes the crystalline structure, and that's what they were showing with homeopathic remedies as well, in both water and alcohol. So you can see that there is an energetic component and there is a change in the substance that you are taking, and it's not just a placebo effect at that point in time.
So is it the succussion or that pounding motion that is the energetic component here? That is what is being, and what is it? I mean, this might be a really silly question, but what is it about that motion or about that energetic frequency that is, or do we just not know? Is it,
I don't think I know enough about that yet. I just see it as like it's movement, it's
yeah.
energy, it's changing that up. And that's what Hahnemann found. And so when Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, he was a German, like we can into a little bit of the history of it in a little bit, but what he found is he went into like the Amazon rainforest, and he was researching some things on something called quinine, as it related to like malaria with tribes there. And so he saw that they were taking this herb in herbal form in really, really low doses to help treat the symptoms. And so he was a doctor and like a typical MD of his time. And so it got him thinking like, okay, so if you can treat something in low doses, well, how could we make this even stronger? And so that's when he got into the potentization. So like the first homeopathic remedies were tested in very low dose forms of like giving someone arsenic or giving something quinine, and then he started potentizing. It makes it safer, it made it stronger, it made it better, it made it more successful for like the treatment of people. So like that's just giving energetic movement, like going into like quantum physics and we know that there is movement all around us. We know that, like, even though a plant's swaying in the wind, there's also an energy to that actual like plant medicine still. Yes. So the succussion gives it that. And I talked about the like the hand making way of making that remedy. The like pharmacies that are like standardized around the world as well make remedies out of these raw materials, and they have machines that do that. Like so like they're going to be like like the machine will be succussing, 700 bottles at a time or something, and then take it very standard. So like some common pharmacies that you would find are Boron, Boiron. That's one of the first ones from it's based in France. Oleos is a newer one, but they are also based in France. Helios, all these great names, is based in the UK. So there's some great pharmacies in the United States as well. And then there are also machines that make remedies. That's a whole other
If you go
concept.
to, you're talking about going to the grocery store and that they have, because Whole Foods has, like, I mean, just simple ones, it seems, but I'm sure that if somebody wanted more specific things, that's where you go see a homeopathic doctor or provider, right?
Yeah.
Practitioner.
Yeah. So Whole Foods actually took them off the shelf, took all remedies off the shelf. I think that was more of like a financial thing. They probably weren't making much money off of it because homeopathy is actually quite cheap. You can get a vial for like $7 to $10 at the store. Versus a prescription medication that could be upwards of like $1,500 or more. Yeah, you can just buy the basic ones at the store. Like and each vial will have a few things that it treats on it. It'll have like, for example, there's a remedy called Nux vomica. It's great for constipation, can be helpful for nausea, or like overindulgence, and those might be listed on the vial at the store. However, if you truly dig into what that remedy does and you look at it like as a homeopath looks at it, that has I'm like looking at my book right now, like 10 to 15 pages of these like the small Bible, like almost like printed like a Bible in the materia medica of the symptoms that it treats. So it's not just what's on that vial. So if you're experiencing symptoms that you can't solve through just taking something from that vial and you have no idea what's going on, or especially if there's chronic conditions, working with a homeopath can be extremely helpful to like help support what's going on and get a more specific remedy. It's called like the similinum, like the most similar remedy that you can find that will match. And the stores are only going to sell like the top 100 remedies. And then homeopaths can help you get into the right potencies. So I mentioned all like the C potencies, but there are potencies that are X's, which are like tens, and or M's, which are like thousands or millions. So you can imagine that there is like a whole, I mean, it's an art. It's an art and a science at the same time.
Yeah, no, it makes me think of like and again, this is not medical advice that I'm about to share. This is just something I do in my own, like for my own healing and health. Like if I get a fever, right, or I start feeling like, that those kind of symptoms coming on, like fevers are hot, right? So sauna and hot baths, and I actually use rose oil in my hot baths. Like I don't know what it is, but like the heat when I do sauna and hot baths with that, I mean, it nips it in the bud, like so amazing, right? And it's that concept.
It helps your body fight it and like or support it. And where I want to get or I want to let's bring this up actually. So like the like for like when you so in the case of a fever, for example, the goal is not to suppress that fever. That's what allopathic medicine would do. That's what like taking Tylenol or ibuprofen would do, or Motrin. It will lower the fever. Homeopathy is going to meet the body where it is and spike it maybe a little bit higher by giving that remedy so that your body's own vital force, or force, as we call it in homeopathy, or prana energy, that is going to it basically tells your vital force like, oh, I need to go a little stronger. I need to spike this up. I need to work to support the body. So you might take the temperature after taking a homeopathic remedy, like you would after taking a hot bath, for example, and it's going to be a little bit higher. That's nothing to fear. That's actually like, oh, this remedy is working. And then it will bring it down. It tells the body to do what it needs to do that it might not be able to do on its own.
This kind of reminds me of when you introduced German New Medicine to me when we first started talking about it. And what I was really blown away with on that modality was the concept that instead of like when we look at our symptoms, it's really our body. I mean, I think common sense says, yeah, like your immune system is your body arising to fight something, but we look at symptoms generally as super unhealthy and we got to stop them, where it's shifting to look at our symptoms as like, oh, my body, like this is actually its way of healing. The symptom is how it's healing. And again, I know that there's a lot of different perspectives out there on how to manage symptoms, but I'm curious, if you were to share a little bit about that, because it's very fascinating to reflect on. And it was very relevant in the sense of the psycho-emotional stuff that I was dealing with at the time and helping kind of make things make a little bit more sense.
Yes. And that's a huge shift for our society, like the entirety of the world to understand is that, and to think about is that like a symptom is the healing. It completely, I mean, it's a different mindset from, oh, symptoms are bad. We need to suppress the symptoms. We need to get rid, or not even suppress them, but we need to get rid of the symptom. Like you shouldn't have the symptom. The symptom is telling you something that's going on in your subconscious or psyche, like that you might need to shift in your life, or that you might need to shift in your diet, or you might need to shift in like your lifestyle of what you're doing. What German New Medicine is it was discovered in the 70s by a doctor named Dr. Hammer. And there's some wonderful podcasts out there that maybe I could have you link as well if you wanted to put them in the show notes to like learn more, because the books are lacking in the English language. So podcasts, learning via podcasts, practitioners and like school, like training programs basically is the way that you learn. But what it is, like I said, Dr. Hammer discovered it in the 70s. And what he discovered was that there's a link between the psyche, the brain, and the organ. The psyche being your deep subconscious, like the emotions, the like how the things that you're attaching and like the mental state to things. The brain being your actual physical brain. So all this is proven through brain scans. And then the organ being that physical symptom. So that doesn't just mean the liver, or it doesn't just mean like, the heart as like a physical organ, but it means like the physical symptom that you're presenting. So what happens is that someone experiences some level of shock or trauma. And there is criteria that the shock or trauma has to meet. It has to be isolating, and it has to be like a one-off event as well. There's a couple of other things that we won't fully get into, but it has to be like a shock to the system. And then when that occurs, a lesion, not in a scary way, am I saying lesion, but a lesion occurs in the brain that you could see through a CAT scan. And that lesion, what that does is when you resolve that trauma. So like say you were, okay, let's talk about like the fires going on right now. Say you got separated from your pet in the fire, even like your dog. And that's like a shock, the trauma. I didn't expect that to happen. And then that lesion turns on, that flares up. And then all of a sudden your dog comes back to you, like a shelter found the dog 5 days later. Your dog comes back to you and you get this massive rash on your arms, like down here, like into like you get like eczema basically that pops up. That's like the resolution. So that symptom being the resolution, that being like the organ's way of expressing itself from that separation conflict. So symptom being the resolution, you were already like, you resolved, you fixed it, you were reunited with your dog. That's what happens in the body. And separation conflicts, and everyone, freaks out about skin and they're like, oh my gosh. But actually, that's like one of the easiest ones to figure out to some extent, and it'll resolve itself on its own. But we like to suppress it in allopathic medicine, but homeopathy can also like really get the emotions out. So if you were never were reunited with your dog, but you see another dog and you start getting a rash because that was a resolution for you, like let's work through some like perceptual shifts to also get the rash to go away. German New Medicine has that connection to everything. It just makes symptoms like very, very beautiful. So even like me having this stuffy nose right now that I have going on, I mean, I've had this going on for like a good chunk of my pregnancy, but I like also recognize that I've been like sniffing out danger in certain experiences and things that I've been doing over the last few months. But like for someone that's like trained allopathically or even holistically, like, oh, you have a cold, or oh, that's not very good. Like, no, it's actually great. My body keeps resolving whatever it is that's like stinking or that feels dangerous to me. And that's just what it's doing. It's hard to view it like that sometimes, but it really does become a very beautiful thing.
I think the biggest thing, like when, because you're right, it's this huge perception shift that I think sometimes it can be really hard for people, because it's just not culturally how we were brought up to view our health. Um, but what I love, love, love is that essentially it's like you're also making meaning, right? We're deriving meaning from the symptoms as well. And I think that's really big because nothing happens for no reason, right?
Yes.
And if we carry that perspective, I think it might be a little easier for us to shift into, well, actually, my body is just essentially working through life,
Mhm.
right? Like none of us are getting through this unscathed. But if we can attach meaning, right, then I think that can help maybe some people to shift their perspective on this a little bit.
Yeah, it's a protective mechanism our body is doing. If we didn't react, like for example, we lost our territory or something, and like, I mean, if we didn't react, it could kill us, let's say. Like
Right.
biologically, like we have to look back to our ancestors and look back to biology of like what, like how, like what's the like most primitive survival function that we have. And that's where German New Medicine really comes into play, and what Dr. Hammer was looking at is like, why is your body biologically shifting like this? And we've introduced so many more things into our lives in the past 2000 years, even like social media, like you're scrolling through and you see something that you want. Well, like, why do so many people have Crohn's and digestive problems now? There's morsels out there. They're like seeing everything on Instagram, and then finally they resolve it. They get it or they get over it. They want to go to the next post. So, yeah, it's such like a beautiful thing, and it gives value to the symptoms, which we love to have value in our world on everything. And like even like it decreases fear is when you can really shift your perception on symptoms, it decreases fear. German New Medicine doesn't view diagnoses as accurate. It views them as like bucket diagnoses. I mean, even go and look at like the symptoms of MS. You have like 90 to 100. Like, oh, you have two of these symptoms. You fit that lab work. You have multiple sclerosis. Yeah, that doesn't line. It doesn't make sense.
I feel like too, one is it gives like what you guys are saying, context and things to consider and how we can be in relationship with our body and with our symptoms. But I think one thing that's scary and challenging with even talking about this is because no, I don't think anybody ever wants to be irresponsible with how they guide people, right? But when I look at with our scope of practice, for example, with yoga therapy or using the Ayurvedic sciences and so forth, a big component for the efficacy comes down to the self-awareness that we're cultivating through these practices or these tools. And when we have a template such as German New Medicine or some of these different perspectives that really allow, like, for example, if there's something that keeps reoccurring, and even though we're doing things, okay, now you're good, then it reoccurs, the template, so to speak, of these modalities can help us build a new relationship with those things that are coming up. And then I love too, it wasn't that, like, in some cases it can solve and correct it, but I think when you said like it can help debunk the fear, because you can feel so powerless when there are so many symptoms going on. And I've been diagnosed with, these type of different conditions and like thyroid issues or this and that, but it's like, okay, I only have one of those. I don't associate with all of this, or it's just, so it can be really tough. And I think we're in a time where it's really confusing navigating health in our culture in a lot of ways, because there is so much out there, but also there's a lot of like, this is the one way to do it. So it can be a tough line to work with. This episode is brought to you by Mel Yoga Teacher Training Programs. If you have the desire to deepen into your yoga practice, awaken skills that stretch beyond the mat, Mel Yoga provides comprehensive training experiences, from starting in your 200-hour yoga teacher training, which offers adaptive, inclusive teachings to bring yoga into therapeutic arenas, or pursuing advanced education in our 300-hour yoga teacher trainings, which are a foundation for yoga therapy, and our overarching yoga therapy program that is structured in a model that takes you into an accessible schedule that makes this journey yours. For more on our training and education, including Vedic astrology, Reiki, meditation, and more, visit melmarieyoga.com. As a listener of the podcast, please enjoy complimentary yoga free on demand through our app at melmarieyoga.com. Thank you for being a listener, and we hope you enjoy listening to these episodes.
Yes. And you mentioned a word like associate yourself. And that's what people tend to do. And they take on the identity of a diagnosis, or they take on the identity of a symptom. And I think that's where we get into like a very, I don't want to, like, it's a dangerous downhill spiral, because that identity then becomes who you are. It becomes how you react to others in the world. It becomes how you work with like the health system, like whether you're going to be on medications for the rest of your life or not, or whether you are going to not identify personally with a symptom or a diagnosis and rise above that. Look at what the symptom is actually telling you in your life. What I've found with clients is that, and like this is where I find homeopathy is beautiful too, and like a beautiful like modality to utilize with understanding this lens, is that there's patterns that people take on. So if someone has skin issue or separation, like skin issues, that's oftentimes like their thing. Like that is what they identify with like the eczema, but they get it in all different places. And so they're taking on conflicts more in that separation way. So maybe they get like blepharitis around their eyes, but they also have eczema on their arms or in their neck, and it's a regular occurrence. Like those are likely two separate things. I mean, they see things as separation. Like for myself, I have my own conflicts that are like my regularly occurring ones. Some people that have a lot of muscular pain, or joint or bone pain, that's like self-devaluation at different levels. And they have all of the pain everywhere. And that's what's happening. So the patterns that come into play, it's like nature, how nature creates patterns. They create patterns in like the leaves and like even like the dirt and the trees. Like a tree is a pattern when you cut into it. These patterns can help us solve the symptoms, but also understand why something's happening, and then shift our thoughts around it. Because it's usually our thoughts that are creating these things.
Well, and that's what yoga says, right? Like the whole like thing with yoga is it's about decreasing suffering and increasing vitality, right? How do we increase vitality in things that nourish, and then decrease the things that are causing suffering? So
yeah, how do you create true freedom in the mind? Because once you have that, you have freedom in the body and the soul. It gets really deep. Other than that, though, like something I did want to bring up too, it like just to bring it back to like the Vedic space as well, is something that I have found fascinating and learning from my teachers recently, and just like my own homeopath that I work with too, is looking at someone's birth chart. And like I only am looking at their birth chart, but looking at that and understanding what was going on in like the planetary alignment in the world at that point in time when they were born, and also looking at their human design. And that gives me some insight into specific like remedies or like things that they might be experiencing but not sharing. Like for example, someone's like moon is in Virgo. Like I know that they're going to be more of some level of like perfectionism, wanting orders and details. So when things get outside of that for them, on like the mental emotional plane, that creates a lot of like uproar in their life. But also looking at like the signs. So like whether they have a lot of fire signs in their planetary alignment versus Earth, those people are going to be more reactive and most likely need higher potencies of remedies. So I'm looking at that as well. And it's an art form again. But it's really, really neat. And I have seen it personally like work for myself and my children to the point where that's where I'm like really digging in, learning as well from my teacher and like just, experimenting. But it's really worked for my clients too. Like if someone is not shifted, like you have the right remedy, but they're not shifting in a lower potency. And then I go back and I'm looking at their chart and I'm like, oh, they definitely need like a 1M. Like they have a lot of fire, they have no earth. Like, why is anyone even thinking that a 30C would work for them? That's been like very, very effective to look at that. So again, energy, like what was going on in the energy of the world when you were brought onto this earth.
I love the subsect of the two. And I think, medical astrology is something that we touch on often. Mel and I are by no means professional medical astrologers, but I love that you found your own, right, like way there very naturally. Because I
Mhm.
think, a lot of times when we think about Vedic astrology in the context of health, well, it's like Ayurvedic astrology, right? But I love that we're taking this and you're taking two modalities. And I mean, yeah, right. When we look at like the constitution of a person elementally, like that's going to tell us so much about how they digest, so much about how their body absorbs. So I love that you've taken so many different things and just like found this little gem of like, wait, these actually all work
Yeah.
together.
Yep. Even looking at like someone that's more pitta versus kapha or something, like looking at that, but then looking at their astrological chart is just it's amazing. And being able to hold multiple truths at once is something that I have had to really work at and understand and learn rather than just hopping from like this is truth to this is truth.
Mm.
That has been like really, really helpful for me in my practice and just overall life of being able to have that flexibility and do that. And I attribute a lot of that to homeopathy and like working with that medicine and like for my own self too, and like taking specific remedies. But yeah, it's beautiful. And that just also goes to say that if there is an allopathic approach to something and that feels right to the individual, that's their right modality for them. Like we have medicine for that reason, like modern medical technology for that reason. It's just a lot of people don't feel that's right in their gut, that they don't feel that's right in whatever is their intuitive mechanism. And that's where these other modalities are beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think too, because sometimes you'll hear people say, well, they may have used that, but like we live longer today. And I think that people forget two very important things is one, we have the technology to help us live longer for one. And two, back then, the access to education was so limited as well. Like the access to resources and the access to knowing about things, like we take that for granted today to realize like how much knowledge that we have access to makes a difference in, I think, how long we live or how well we live and how we navigate different things that maybe 200 years ago would have been, like if you got bit by a scorpion, you could not Google what to do. Like you just gotta hope like, I don't know, right?
Or you couldn't get to the medicine woman fast enough because there was no means of transportation. Like it's silly things like that that often just like are like phew over our head. But
Hmm.
I love that you mentioned, the intuitive aspect of choosing what's right for you based on how it feels. Because I think there can be a lot of pressure sometimes when we're trying to choose what avenue of health, what avenue of self-care we're going to lean into. There's so much outside influence that it can really bog down, right? Like our authority to choose what really is best for us. And so I like, if allopathic medicine fits for you, like I'll share like my husband is like that's his jam. Like he will probably work in a hospital the rest of his life and like believes in it. We have friends, who are MDs and like that's great. And they do wonderful, wonderful work. It's not to take away from any of these different subsects of medicine. It's just to say, right, that it's not one size fits all and that there is a true intuitive approach to choosing, right? And also having like not only the option to choose, because so many people don't, right, have the option to choose what type of medicine is right for them, but being able to step into your agency and say, well, this is not true for me,
Hmm.
right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Well, we also have to think about too that we like personal wellness really should be an entire arena in itself. Like our day-to-day wellness, like maybe, obviously like if I got stabbed, I'm going to the hospital, right? Or there's something like serious. I'm probably gonna, but at the same time, like the way we live our day-to-day life, that matters for our health too. And all of these things, like if I have a symptom that comes up or I don't feel well in a day, the ability to use these templates as well can be so profound for finding balance until, and oftentimes it can nip things pretty quickly and you just keep flowing with your life. But I know we're getting close to the end, and this is so interesting, so thought provoking. Hannah, if people wanted to work with you, because you do offer one on one sessions, and I know you're an incredible resource for just so many things. And I know you have courses and so many gems that people can begin their journey with this stuff or even work with you. What would you recommend for people for getting started with you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So I will give you my website to link. I do see one-on-one initial consults, and then I just launched a course, it's virtual 10 modules. It's specific to pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So if anyone is in that arena, like that perinatal space in their life, I have that course. It's homeopathy with a little sprinkle of German new medicine into it. And I would love to launch a couple of courses in the future that are more like introductory. On my site, I also have a 40-minute video on what German New Medicine is. If this has intrigued you and you want to get a free resource there, there's that. And then I am a part of a membership program with two other women, and it's a homeopathy and holistic health membership. So we do monthly office hours with topics and quarterly mini classes, and you have access to all past resources as well. So all of that information is on my site. So I will link it there. But yeah, I love working with people one-on-one. I feel like that is where I myself also learn the most. And I love building those relationships with people too. So
So when we talk, about the actual, like the physical medicine, is it often more time used for colds, flus, one-off headaches? What about people who have more chronic illnesses?
oh,
Is it safe to take stuff
yes.
consecutively or treat long term?
Yes, both. So like there are like homeopaths that see people for acute things. I just don't have that space in my life right now to
Yeah.
be able to have acute appointments on a regular basis. So I
Yeah.
see people for more chronic conditions, but it shines in both lights. So if you can chronically figure out what someone's like best remedy is for them at that point in time, they can be taking that for a little while. And then that might peel back some layers of the onion. It'll open up some emotions oftentimes because we are very emotionally repressed as a population. Um, and then more things will come to light. And then there might be a new remedy. So that's more chronic. And typically that means you're probably going to be working with a homeopath for a while. And if you can do that and see the value in that, it is an incredible modality to use. And then acutely, yes, there are things for colds. There are even blends that you can find at the store that are homeopathic blends by like Highlands or Boron that specifically say like cold calm, or oscillococcinum is a huge one for the flu or flu symptoms. So those are the types of things that you can take on your own too acutely. And that doesn't mean that it's going to stop the cold in its tracks necessarily. It just means it's going to give the body the power it needs to support the healing process through that. And that's where there's a misconception, I think, oftentimes of like, oh, I should never get sick. No, you should get sick. Like you should have these symptoms. It's your body presenting you with this, even this in this acute fashion. Like you needed to get through this. You needed to get that cough because you got scared, or you needed to get that cold because you were scenting danger, or something really sucked that just came up and you needed to get that cold to process through. So the homeopathy can help support the body
I always,
physically.
I always think of it like computers have to do software updates.
Hmm.
It's just our bodies doing these software updates that we need to rest. And oftentimes, that if we're not going to take time to rest, we're more susceptible because the body burns out quicker. So, like, the
Yes.
importance of slowing down and allowing the body to repair. I mean, that's what's happening when we're working through something, the body's repairing. And then I believe also that when we are back online, we're more refined, where, it's so natural, to have to be human. Like this stuff is so human, right? This was so interesting. This is, I mean, lots of resources to dive into if this is something that people are interested in learning more about and, seeking it as an option. And again, I think that with all the work we do with yoga, right, in the sense of finding balance and increasing vitality, all these conversations are so necessary. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing your gifts and your wisdom with our community. And all the information for her website and resources will be in the show notes. So thank y'all for tuning in today.
Thank you.